Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 6. All right, let's review today's line, Scotch Gambit, and now we're dealing with knight f6 again. We did that in line number 2, and now that we've covered the top 5 most common moves and driven it all the way to the end, we are going to repeat knight f6 and take the second most common line. So they go knight f6, we do e5. And now, instead of doing d5, which we covered in line 2, which happens 48% of the time, we're doing knight g4, which happens 20% of the time, and is not a particularly great move, but we want to be able to punish it optimally if a weaker player goes down this line, or if a stronger one decides to. So they go knight g4. We protect that tactically by castling, and the most common continuation for the players who go down this line is actually to think that they can win that by taking it. So knight at g takes e5 happens 35% of the time, so they take. And it's important for us to take with our knight at this point, and then draw out their other knight, and then pin it. So we pin that. Then they go d6 to protect it, and before they get a chance to break the pin, we go f4. They go bishop b7, we take the knight with our pawn, they take back, and now most white players at this point continue with rook takes e5 85% of the time. 4% of the time they do queen h5, which is the superior move. That's what we're going to be doing. Queen h5, threatening checkmate on f7. They castle, then we go bishop d3, threatening checkmate again on h7. They block with g6, and now we take that pawn, not with our rook, but with our queen. And then they go bishop f6, attacking our queen. We back off to e4. And then 2 games reached this point, and they continued with bishop f5 on both games, and they were lower rated players, and so it's probably one of the more common moves you're going to run into. So we'll continue bishop f5, and then we take that pawn on b7, and that's the end of the line. And so let's rewind that and let's get into it. All right, so pull up the Scotch Gambit again. And this time, let's catch up our cheat sheet here, our mapper. All right, so we can see the strengths of the moves. So they go knight f6, which is equality at that point, and then we push e5. And then we can see that d5 is equality, but knight g4 is 14 points in white's favor, which is a modest, slight advantage, not huge. So it's actually quite playable. You could actually learn this line and learn it well and pull strong players down a line they may not have learned very well and have a decent game. So it's another branching off point. There's tons of those in the Scotch Gambit as black. And they're actually in lots of openings. You don't have to sacrifice a lot of engine score on your moves in order to pull people out of their openings. There's just places to do that all over the place, I have found. And so I think there might be some better ones in this one, but it's definitely a possibility. I think knight e4 would be a better jumping off point. It happens a lot less frequently, and it's stronger. But knight g4 is actually playable if black follows it up with good moves, which they usually don't. So they go knight g4. And we can see that the 14-point lead stays a 14-point lead. And when we go in deeper, it's still a 14-point lead 3 moves deep. And so we can count on that score being pretty reliable because it's not fluctuating a lot. So they go knight g4, and then we castle to protect it tactically. All right, let's take a look at that. And at this point, they need to go bishop e7. So if someone's going to play this well, they're going to continue bishop e7. And that happens 16% of the time, and that is their predominantly best move. d6 isn't bad either. It's a little bit, that could just be a fluctuation. 14. Yeah, it's neck and neck. They could go d6 or bishop to e7. Those are both strong engine moves. Bishop c5 is a little bit weaker. They're going to drop 25 points if they do that, but most people do knight at g takes e5 and go down to a score of you are 279 points ahead. So it's just awful. And that 279 actually increases more because they don't want to sacrifice their queen, and that's the only way to prevent it from getting even better. So you can count on that 279 growing even better. So they take, and then you have to take, of course. So they take, and then we take, and then they have to take at that point to avoid being much worse off. And then we pin their knight with rook to e1, threatening to win it. And they can't move it, and it's going to die, so they protect it, hoping that we'll just overlook the obvious. and they go d6 is the most common way to do that. They could go f6 to try to do it. Other common moves, bishop d6, bishop e7. You can see the strengths of all those different moves right here on the side. 314, 325, 330, 388. So 3 of them are clumped together as similarly inferior, not good enough to protect us. The best move is surprisingly queen e7. And this is why we're gaining more points here. So queen e7 is their top engine move. And I don't have it mapped on this one, but it basically goes like this. They go queen e7, and then you go f4, attacking that pin knight, and then they take your bishop and let you take their queen. So they get a bishop and a rook out of the bargain, and that's their best way forward. And you can see how many people choose that and capitulate and give up, take the hit now rather than hoping that their opponent will make a mistake. Queen e7, 4% of the time they do this top engine move. The rest of the time they're playing d6 almost half the time. So we're going to be preparing for d6, and our score will go up another 50 points because they don't want to sacrifice their queen. So then we hit them with f4. And now they got 4 common moves. The most common of which is bishop to e7, happens 1/3 of the time, 33%, and it is their top engine move. So they go bishop e7, breaking that pin, and now we can't let that knight get away, so we pop it off. That's our only good move. And then their best move now is to go d5, their top engine move. How often do people play that? 4% of the time. It is superior by a decent amount. D takes e5 is done 81% of the time, and castling 14% of the time, both of which are inferior. D takes e5 is better than castling, and it is the dominant move 81% of the time, so we'll be covering that. So they take back, and now we can go queen to h5, we can go rook takes e5, and then there's a number of other moves that I needed to double check to make sure that I'm only going to a depth of 200 million nodes instead of a billion like I'd like. So I need to explore all of these just to make sure that we're not getting some large point swings in any one of them, especially when the position is open and a queen is loose. So I went down all of these, and we can see that at this point 85% of white players take at e5 with their rook. And that's this move right here, rook takes e5, score of 324. But a score of 347 is for queen h5, and that happens by white. White plays that 4% of the time. So here's an inaccuracy where you could be giving a little bit of points back to black and helping him out. We don't want to do that. We want to pin him to the wall. So let's take a look at these just to make sure that the random fluctuations aren't changing these scores a lot. So queen h5, once we play that, 89% of the time they castle, nothing else is common. And our score there is 341. A moment ago, it was 347. If we go a little deeper, it's 358. So we can see that we're going to be in the 340s to 350s here, and it's pretty stable after looking 3 moves deep. So queen h5 is in the 350s. Let's glance at the others, make sure that they don't beat that. Rook takes e5. 324, we go into it, 324. I don't need to map it any deeper, and I didn't. After seeing it be 324 twice in a row, I didn't need any more convincing. Knight to d2 is in the 295, 300. I don't need to look any deeper. And you can see I also marked the common moves on each of these continuations and looked at each of their scores and compared it to the queen to h5 line, which is strictly superior. Queen f3 I even looked at. Even king h1 we can see. Everything else gives substantial advantage back to black. It's not worth it. Queen h5 is the best way to go. So we go queen h5, threatening checkmate. They castle to get out of it. That's their top engine move. And we go bishop d3. Now knight to d2 also looked good, and that one was a very tough call. I'll show you how far I went to decide on that one. So let's see here. Bishop d3 looks like this. We have 3 branches there. That branches, those branch, those branch. Let's go to there. That branches. There's our main line that I ended up going with. That's bishop d3. Here's knight d2. We do knight d2. They've got these 3 common moves. If we play if they play that one, we respond that way. They might respond that way or that way, and then there's the final scores there, and then I looked at all the moves I could do there. So when I say I mapped really far ahead and looked at our responses, their responses, our responses, their responses, several moves deep to determine which one to go with, this is a great example of me doing that. So I hope this gives you some confidence in how much I mapped this out. Knight to d2 is mapped out quite a bit along all the lines and all the responses and their responses in order to determine that bishop d3 really is the superior move. From the point of view of, we don't need to worry about obscurity anymore. They're definitely out of book at this point. But when it comes down to engine strength, trickiness for the position for our opponent, and minimizing how much branching we have to learn, and making sure that the branching that we do have is minimized in the amount, but maximized in how good our score is. And we don't want to, keeping in mind that we don't want to memorize, that it's okay if there's branching that gives us an awesome score. We want those. And the bigger the score of their bad moves, the more we are willing to deal with more branching. And if it's more minor, then we don't want it as much. So taking all that into account, bishop d3 beat knight d2. It was more forcing and ended up with better scores. And so that's why I went with that one here. So we go bishop d3, threatening checkmate on h7, and then they block with g6 is their top engine move. It happens 2/3 of the time, so learning that one move gives us really broad coverage. But let's glance at h6 because it isn't a line, it's a quick defeat in most cases. And so we don't want to cover it later, we want to cover it now. So they might do h6 here 13% of the time, and you can see that white bungled it a lot and didn't finish him properly. So h6. So if our opponent goes h6, take a look at bishop takes h6 compared to everything else. It totally dominates. So bishop takes h6, and now the obvious move is to take back, and that happened 42% of the time. Bishop to f6 happened 33% of the time. If they take back, we take with our queen, and now we're threatening checkmate on h7 unless they play a f5. So they take back, we take, and then they try and get out of checkmate with f5. But that fails to bishop to c4 check. So they go there, and we go check. And now it's pretty much checkmate unless they block with the rook. And if they do that, then we can just check them on g6 and win the rook and checkmate them anyway. Or it doesn't actually checkmate them. The score says 685 and not 1000, which is which is the way I encoded checkmate. See right here, 1000.02. That means checkmate in 2. So we're going to basically win that rook and blow open their king side for the cost of a bishop. So we end up really dominating there. But let's back up a minute and just make sure we cover this completely. So they go h6, we take it with our bishop, and they might attempt, delete that variation, bishop f6 at this point. And then you get this cute little bishop takes g7, threatening checkmate on h7 and h8, and they can't block both of those. And so that's game right there, checkmate in 1. So h6 fails, and if they played against you, make sure you do bishop takes h6. You notice that the win rate for white was not, let's see, after bishop d3 and then they go h6, the win rate wasn't as high as it should have been because not all the white players are taking on h6. Only about half of them are. And so the rest of them are flushing a lot of their game-winning advantage here down the drain. So enough about h6. So now that we've covered h6, let's go to g6. And that actually gives us really good coverage. So g6 is 65%, h6 is 13%, add them up. We have 78% coverage of this position. So they go g6, and now we take that pawn on e5 with our queen, not our rook, which is the better way to go. So let's see, g6, you can see queen takes e5 is definitely the best move here. They play that. And then we have 3 common moves that black does at this point. Bishop to f6, bishop to d6, and rook to e8. And we can see their scores over here on the side. Today we're going to cover bishop f6, which happens 42% of the time. And then we go queen e4. Now, there were some other good moves here, and I explored them really wide and really deep in all their variations before deciding I like queen e4 best. So queen e4. And then only 2 games came to this point, and in both cases, their players were between about 1,300 and 1,500 and change, and both of the games continued with bishop f5, and then we took, and here I'll show it over here, bishop to f5, and then we take on b7. Queen f3 isn't bad, but the b7 one is more forcing. And then I mapped a whole bunch of continuations from here just to make sure this wasn't a nasty position for us. We do need to develop our bishop and our knight, and we do need to do that very delicately and make sure we put them in good squares so we don't end up allowing our opponent to weasel their way out of, you know, creating some counterplay. We don't want them to do that. So we pop off that pawn there. And so let's look at a little bit of this ending position. They can take our bishop on d3, and it's fine. So bishop takes d3. We just take back with the c-pawn, and you can see all our scores here are clearly in the low 400s. So the exchange is not helpful to black right here. And what else can he do? Well, if he doesn't move that bishop, then we can trade. We can take it. So if they try something else like bishop g7, we take on f5. If they try c5, we take on f5. So on a lot of these lines here, if they don't take our bishop, we take theirs. In both cases, it simplifies the position, and we are in a game where we have a knight for a pawn and a good position. So this gives us a very high chance of winning this game. Bishop e6 is interesting. It's at the top of the, it's given the top engine score at this depth, but if I go one deeper, it's not so hot if we respond with bishop h6. So they try and avoid the bishop exchange by bringing their bishop over here to e6, and then we go bishop to h6 is our optimal response there, developing that bishop to a nice square, and then we can bring our knight over to d2 with the bishop out and get some very easy development and get a hold of this position here. That's pretty much it. So if any of you have ever gained a knight for a pawn and then went on against a weaker opponent, and then your opponent weaseled out of it and then equalized and then took you to an endgame and ground it out and then won, you know how frustrating that is. Or if you win a knight for only a pawn against a stronger player and then they manage to outplay you after that and they take that win away from you, it's very frustrating. And so it's important to map won positions, not just lost positions, or it's important to map won positions, not just learn how to get winning positions, because it's almost as hard to convert a win sometimes as it is to get the winning position in the first place, especially against stronger rated players. So if you're a lower rated player and somebody makes this mistake of losing that piece early on, but they're a higher rated player than you, if that's their only mistake, they might be able to turn the game around, and you don't want them to do that. So you want to learn how to punish this optimally. And anyway, that is the line, and until next time, thank you.